This is a Story Track podcast.
Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Building Stories. I'm your host, Steve Harris, and today is my interview with Anthony Johnson. Anthony is the president of the Industrial Business Unit for Clayco, and you know Clayco. They're building everything from plants for EV cars to breweries. I mean, they do it all. So can't wait to talk about that and then learn about his background. I think he started as a carpenter, if I'm not mistaken. So how do you go from carpenter to Clayco? We'll find out. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. I am excited to finally get to talk to you. I've seen you at some of the Clayco jobs, but I'm always trying to film and I've never got a chance to actually meet you. So it's nice to finally meet you. And thanks for doing this podcast.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for taking the time to do it. And I'm glad we could connect and share a little bit about my background for you.
Yes. And that's really what I want to talk to you about. It seems like, if I have this correct, were you a carpenter in Minnesota?
I was at one point in time. Yeah. I grew up in Minnesota. My whole family's still up there. All of my grandparents and everybody were kind of Norwegian and Scandinavian area immigrants that came to Western Minnesota. And my parents were the first ones to move kind of from Western Minnesota into the cities. They both got into education. And one trait that I think is interesting that stuck with them from Western Minnesota and the Scandinavian background, et cetera, was I grew up in a household where everything that you needed to fix or everything you needed to build on your house or repair or whatever, you always figured out a way to do it yourself. It was on the house, in the yard, whatever. And I really enjoyed doing that when I was a kid. And I think that's kind of an aspect that really stuck with me throughout my life. And I ended up, after being a kid and graduating high school, taking a little bit of a different trajectory, I'd say, than a lot of people that have gotten into this business. I started out as a pre-med biology major in college.
Wow.
And to pay for school, I was working construction. I was working summers, I was working nights, I was working weekends sometimes, which, you know, the 6 a.m. on a job site while you're in college is a pretty early Saturday morning, if you recall back to Saturday mornings in college. So, so it was a little bit different pathway for sure. What I found out really quick was, number one, I was not a huge fan of biology and wanting to do that for the rest of my life. And number two, I really enjoyed construction. And so I bounced around a little bit with majors for a while. And actually what I ended up doing was deciding, you know what, construction is what I want to do. So I'm going to quit college and go buy a house. And I was doing that full time for quite a while. I worked during the week. I was working weekends, you know, doing side jobs and things to keep busy. And it was probably about, 3-4 years into doing that full time that I learned about a degree path that was related to construction project management and commercial construction. And my dad kind of convinced me to go check out a program at the University of Minnesota. And so after doing that, I learned that I could really create my own degree program that would incorporate some of the learnings I'd had previously, but then also incorporate some of the engineering and law, et cetera, that you would have in a construction management program to develop my own curriculum. So having a mortgage to pay for now, I still had to work as a carpenter during the day, but I started going to night school to ultimately work my way through a degree program.
So how do you go from a carpenter in Minnesota trying to get the degree to Clayco in St. Louis?
Well, I have to give a lot of that credit to my wife, to be honest with you. So I met a girl on a plane. Her name was Anna, and she's now my wife. And shortly after meeting, I realized pretty quick that this beautiful Hispanic woman that I'd met, that I wanted to continue talking to, who had an MBA and was working as a marketing executive, her parents were going to be a little taken aback about her dating this construction guy that hasn't even finished his undergrad. So what ended up happening was I continued on plowing through school in my undergrad, continued working full time as a carpenter. And one of the projects that I was fortunate to work on ended up being the CEO of one of the largest commercial builders in the state of Minnesota. And it was a pretty long project, probably about 6 months. And so I got to know him, I got to know his wife and family pretty well. just from overlapping, beginning and end of day. And I explained to them that I was, obviously doing this full time. I was going to school at night, and I was really intrigued by commercial construction. And so after having that conversation with them, he was kind enough to invite me to interview as an intern. And so I accepted that position along with a humongous pay cut. By that point in time, I was making pretty good money as a carpenter, but I had to take a bet on myself to play the long game, basically. And so I ended up going to work for them, starting as an intern, worked on several downtown high rises, kind of worked my way up through the project management ranks, started traveling around the country for them, doing different types of industrial and distribution projects. And through a mutual friend of the industry, Clayco had reached out a couple times over about a 6-month period. And after, I don't know, call it the third reach out, my wife, Anna, said, you should just give him a call and check him out. So I did that. So I came down by myself. And like a lot of people say, when you walk through the doors of Clayco, you just feel an energy. And so I kind of knew when I walked in, and certainly after meeting with several people, that this was really the spot for me. It was a company that really thrives on innovation. It's an entrepreneurial culture. We're always looking for better ways to do things. We embrace a wide array of ideas, thoughts, ideologies, et cetera. And that's the environment and the type of organization that gets me excited. And so my wife came down on a second visit with me, and we got the chance to meet the wives of some of the other folks that worked here and spent another day with the people here. And we both knew that this was the right spot to be.
And so what is that first job?
So I started out at Clayco as a project executive. And so that's a role, we call it essentially a seller doer type role. So you're tasked with understanding a market, finding clients, figuring out how to be successful and win the project, work with the operations group internally to get the right team established, ultimately go execute the work. And then you essentially own the P&L of the project along with the operations team. So you have to kind of structure the job up front to be successful, and then ensure that the customer's happy and the job is profitable at completion.
And was that a hard switch for you?
It was a hard switch in that it was a lot of new clients that I hadn't crossed paths with before. And so to really start to pave the way and build new relationships, which in a service industry like construction and engineering is the ultimate key to success, of relationships. So that was different. Obviously, learning a new organization is different. But just kind of through my lifelong affinity of building, I think the thing that was a parallel is, at the end of the day, I think where I've always really gravitated towards is really trying to understand the product it is we're delivering, how to make it the best that it can be, and how to present it in a way that fits the client's needs.
And do you find some of that background, the stuff you learned from your mom and dad, like, hey, we're going to fix whatever goes wrong in our old house, and then your first jobs, does all of that kind of help you now when you're looking at these jobs? Of course, your jobs now are huge.
Yeah, well, it's funny you bring that parallel up. Whenever I talk to my mom about the size of some of these projects we are working on, she always says, I just can't even fathom the numbers that you're talking about right now. So it is remarkable. But yes, it does all boil down to that common level of where it started, where the principles are based upon the mechanics of construction itself and how that evolved into my career. I think the lessons I honestly learned on a job site are the lessons that I use more frequently on a daily basis than any other point of learning in my life, from when you compare that against in a classroom, for example. There's a lot of important life lessons you learn working out on a job site in the wintertime in Minnesota when it's 15 degrees below zero. Everything from just learning how to buckle down and get the job done, to getting out of bed, getting to work early, being the first one at the job site, learning to work hard to get done quickly, learning to be safe. All of those types of principles were things that really set me up to have kind of an advantage, I'd say, on the office side of the business too, because at the end of the day, it's the folks out in the field that are getting in place what we're all trying to accomplish at the end of the day. And when you've been there, you understand what they're going through. And when you've been there, you've communicated with the people that are out in the trenches every day. And I think there's a different level of trust. There's a different level of conveyance that happens between the two parties. And so I think that really set me up to be able to not just be working in a silo, so to speak, in the office, but really be an employee and a contributor to our business that can act as a team player between the office side, the operations side, the executive team, et cetera.
Has there been a key job or project that really helped you grow or move up the ranks?
Yeah, as I reflect back, there's probably a couple of them that have just really been game changers. So what we didn't talk about was the year that it was when I came to Clayco. And it was the fall of 2008, right at the beginning of the worst economic downturn that has ever been a part of my life. And so we had just obviously quit my job, moved away from my family, bought a new house here in St. Louis. And all of a sudden, here we are on the precipice of an economy coming to a complete stop. And so when you think about a construction business, which a lot of the culture is momentum and new projects, new sales, that builds momentum and excitement within a company. And when the economy grinds to a halt, like it did back then, there's just not a lot of opportunities out there for new projects, new successes. And so in 2009, when we were just in the depths of the recession, there was a huge project in Georgia it was for General Mills, and it was a 1.5 million square foot building. And at that point, I want to say it was probably about the only industrial construction project in the entire United States of America. Wow. There was, as I think back, I believe there was 18 real estate developers that pursued it. Each one of those developers had at least 4 general contractors, if not more, that were proposing directly to them. And after that wide array of competition, all those developers, all those contractors, we ended up down to the developer that was selected and us and one other. And there was a few of us who just, we really knew how important it was to just do whatever it took to win this job. And we worked day and night, getting as creative as we could, building relationships with the suppliers that were necessary to make the job a success. And we ended up winning that project, which, again, the scale of the project was tremendous. It was a 1.5 million square foot building. The cost, I will never forget, was $16.75 a square foot. And today, you could barely buy the steel for that building for $16.75. So that goes to show you how suppressed pricing had become at that time, in the depths of the recession. So that project and winning that gave our company just such a huge blow of wind in the sails to help us get through the recession, which we did. And we actually continued to grow every single year all the way through the recession. We never took a step back. So that was just being shortly after I came here, and in the challenging times that it was an incredibly momentum building project in my career. The next one I would say was a project that was down in Victoria for Caterpillar. And down there, they build the largest hydraulic excavators that they make. This was going to be the first greenfield manufacturing project that Caterpillar had built in the United States in over 30 years. And prior to that, we had completed a project which was more of a distribution center for Caterpillar in Ohio. This Texas project, being a manufacturing job, is more like a automotive assembly plant, basically. And at that point in time, we really didn't have the portfolio of heavy automotive and heavy manufacturing projects that our competition had. So there's no question we were extreme underdogs going into the project, but we had gotten a seat at the table and an ear that would listen to us because we had really leaned into some challenging conditions on that project in Ohio I was referencing. And the owner knew that we were a company that they could count on to deliver when it mattered. And as we received that RFP, we were up against all the heavyweights in the industry in the manufacturing world. And we just took a different approach than I think the rest of the market did. Being the design builders like we are, we've always just been kind of wired to find the best way to build a mousetrap. And instead of taking their recommendation or specifications, if you will, for what they were, we challenged them. And they welcomed that. And the last time, like I said, was 30 years prior that they had built a greenfield manufacturing project in the United States. There wasn't a Kubota in the United States and a Komatsu in the United States. it was a different world at this point in time where they had global competition here domestically. And so we kind of tore the specifications apart and gave them options of how to do the foundation systems different, how to do the electrical systems different, how to do the mechanical systems different. And we weren't telling them this is the way it needs to be, but we said, here's what you've asked for, here's another way of doing it. And by really helping them to understand their business better, we were able to be successful ultimately in winning the project, and also very successful in the delivery and the relationship that we continue to enjoy with Caterpillar at the completion. And so that was really the first greenfield, ground up, big manufacturing project that we had then earned in our portfolio, which has led us to a very large portfolio for some of the largest manufacturing end users in the United States now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the growth and the highlights. Was there any lowlights there where you were like, I don't know how we're going to come back from this?
Construction, engineering, real estate, they're tough business, and there's always bumps in the road. I think what's been helpful for me is being a part of an organization like Clayco is there's just so many great sounding boards and partners that you can bring in to help work through challenges. It always just amazes me how I can walk down the hallway and have a conversation with somebody who's been through just about everything in this business, whether it's a challenging technical foundation problem out in the field, a complex leadership or people challenge that we're trying to work through. Everybody at Clayco has always got the attitude to really roll your sleeves up and try to work through things together. And so that's what's been a great part of being here too.
Awesome. Do you have any new jobs that you want to talk about or things in the works that you can talk about? Yeah,
I'd love to. It's really remarkable and humbling, frankly, to sit here and think about the scale of projects and the level of impact that the projects that we're involved in are having on the world right now. When I came to Clayco in 2008, I want to say we were about a $600 million company as a whole. About half of that was industrial. And this year we'll do about $6.5 billion. Wow. And the level of industrial is anywhere from half to 2/3 of the business, depending on the year. What's also fun within that is that our product type has really increased dramatically from primarily distribution centers either for developers or end users when I first came here. But now we're building on the advanced manufacturing side, everything from EV related projects to automotive to chemical process plants, food and beverage plants, et cetera. And so you look at all the things shaping the world right now, just taking EVs, for example, that I just referenced. The projects driving that market segment are everything from the minerals that go in the battery themselves to the cars. And we're touching all of that. We are building an anode plant for a company called Group 14, which Porsche is their largest investor up in the state of Washington. We are building multiple cathode factories around the United States, including one right here in Missouri for a company called Missouri Cobalt. We are building a factory for the separator that keeps the anode cathode materials separate within the battery for a company called Entech that's up in the state of Indiana. We are building the factory that creates the battery cells themselves. For example, one of those is AESC, which is down in the state of South Carolina. They will be producing batteries for all of BMW's EVs. And then we're working with multiple EV end users right now, including Rivian, which has become one of the more predominant brands in the EV business. So to step back and think about this monumental shift in the automotive world that's taking place and the reach that we have within it is pretty humbling. You can just kind of walk through some of the other aspects, the reshoring of semiconductor fabrication in the United States. And we're working on Samsung's semiconductor fab campus down in Taylor, Texas. We designed and built the highest volume brewery in the United States for a company called Mark Anthony Brewing down in South Carolina. The other, I'd say, monumental thing that's happening in the US that we're really leading the way on is with respect to data centers. And you think about the amount of computing power required for cloud storage, that was on an exponential growth path. And then you insert the success level that artificial intelligence has had since late 2022 in ChatGPT, and that exponential growth curve has exponentially grown even further. And so we are building some of the very first data centers for artificial intelligence, which is obviously a technology that's changing the world as we watch it. And so very, very cool, very humbling to be a part of such impactful projects that are changing the shape of the world.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you got a lot of cool stuff in the works.
Yeah, we do.
What's next for you? Like, what goals do you have set for yourself?
My biggest goals are to really continue to help grow our business in ways that we can help deliver our clients' most complex projects, and then also deliver our projects in a way that our customers see how we're doing it differently. We're really adding value to them. We always strive to not be just a builder. We don't want to be hired because we were the contractor with the cheapest fee. We want to be hired because we're bringing the best solution to our customers. And I think that focus on our customers' need is, that's really what, for example, was the genesis for our engineering group that we have in-house. And so when we're now able to sit down with a customer and not just talk about the walls and the roof of their building, but really talk about, okay, what's happening inside of this building? How do we help you make your products faster, more efficient, get it to the market safer, get it to the market faster? How can we deliver a solution like that we can bring our design and engineering expertise? We can obviously build that building. We can bring our self-perform capabilities to help drive the schedule and drive efficiency into the cost side of the project. So my focus is helping our business grow and evolve into as many of those types of opportunities as we can that are really making an impact in the world and in the lives of our customers.
Nice. If I was a carpenter in Minnesota, what advice would you give me if I wanted to do what you're doing?
If you're a carpenter in Minnesota, I'm going to tell you the first piece of advice is to buy lacrosse ice bowl boots, because no matter how cold it got, my feet never got cold at all. So that's the first piece of advice I'd give you. The second piece of advice I'd give is really to find the right opportunity to have a conversation with the right person. And that can be someone you research and reach out to. It can be someone that you find of a friend of a friend. But my dad has always said from the beginning, it's not always what you know, it's who you know. And in a business like ours, people are everything. And construction is the largest industry in the entire United States economy. And it's easy to think about billion-dollar projects or $6.5 billion companies, and those are big, staggering numbers. But at the end of the phone, at the end of the computer screen, it's people on each end. And so getting aligned with the right people that you can network with and work through and help each other along the way in your career, that's how you evolve and how you take that next step.
Nice. When you're not doing all this great work that you're doing, what do you like to do for fun?
Well, I've got 2 kids right now. I've got a 14-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter, and I am busy like heck trying to keep up with them at everything. So we do a lot of lacrosse tournaments out of town this time of the year in the spring and the summer. In the winter, we're a big ski family. So again, growing up in Minnesota, that is what I fell in love doing as a kid. And I always joke that's what's going to keep me working forever, is to pay for my skiing habit. And so what I stumbled upon a little tiny ski resort here in St. Louis when my son was 2 years old. Didn't realize that when we moved here, but it was only 15 minutes from our house. And he too fell in love with skiing. My daughter started when she was 3. She fell in love with skiing. And believe it or not, we actually have a small race team at this hill in St. Louis. And so in the wintertime, that takes up a good bit of time in our lives. Also, my wife and I, and either by ourselves or with our kids, we love to travel. We be sure to get our kids down to South America to see my wife's family at least once a year. And we like to do a little bit of traveling domestically, and just took our first trip with the kids over to Europe this year for spring break, which was a great time too.
Where is next on your list? Do you guys have a new trip in mind?
Well, next on our list, I've actually got an exciting conference that I'm heading to with my wife. She's coming with me over in Portugal. So that's next on our agenda. And as far as a family, I was interested to see how receptive our kids were to Europe versus a ski vacation. And believe it or not, they absolutely loved that trip, even though we baked in plenty of learning opportunities for them while they were there. So we haven't dialed in anything yet, but thinking either next year or the year after, maybe we'll try to take them to another region over in Europe.
Nice.
Yeah.
And would you want your kids to get into the built world? Like when you go on these trips, do you go and look at sites and point things out to them?
When we go on the trips, absolutely. I mean, I was telling my wife as we're walking through the Louvre, like for me, honestly, I enjoyed taking in the building more than I enjoyed taking in most of the art. Just seeing an architectural gem like that's a special thing for me to see. As far as what my kids want to get into, I mean, honestly, I just want them to get into what they love. And I try to just give them exposure to as many things as I can. And, kind of like myself, I mean, I kind of bumped around until I found what it was that was truly my passion. And once I did, I really leaned into it and took the road less traveled in some respects to get there. But when you're doing something that you really enjoy, that's the route that you want to take. And so I'm happy that they're getting the exposures that they are. And, I'll tell you with the internet and access to information, I think that they get a lot more exposure to different ideas than we probably did when I was a kid. I have made it a point to really try to get out to my kids' schools and talk about careers in engineering and construction and real estate and design. Because when I was a kid, nobody ever came to our schools to talk about these types of careers. It was, doctors, lawyers, and that was about the only options you ever really heard of. And so it's been very eye-opening for the students to hear the opportunities that they have. My daughter goes to an all-girls school. And I could tell as I was speaking to them, it was a similar kind of predisposition that they had arrived to, that working in construction or engineering wasn't really an option for them. In fact, I started asking them questions at the beginning. Tell me, what does somebody who works in construction look like? And it took a few iterations, but eventually everybody aligned on, oh, they're all men. And what I was happy to share is some great examples of some of the incredible women that we have at Clayco that work in every aspect of our business. And so that was a really rewarding experience to be able to open kind of their eyes and open their minds a little bit to they're really having no limit on what their potential can be.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all of your time. I've learned a lot, and I can't wait to see what you guys have next.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Well, thank you, Anthony. It was so great to talk to you and so great to learn all of what you've done at Clayco and what Clayco has in the works. I can't wait to see it. If you all want to hear more interviews like that, please like and subscribe to the Building Stories podcast. And if you want to see what StoryTrack has going on in video production for the built world, check out storytrack.com.